My name is Grace Thompson, and I am 32 years old. I never expected my greatest professional achievement would also become my worst nightmare. As a senior developer at Nexus Technologies, I poured my heart into creating an innovative security protocol that could have revolutionized the industry. Then Marcus Reynolds became our new CTO, and everything changed. He took my project, took my job, and smugly joked about taking my ideas. What he never bothered to check was my contract. If you are watching this, let me know where you are tuning in from. Hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself in the corporate world. My journey into tech was not the traditional route that many of my colleagues followed. I grew up in a small town in Michigan where technology careers were rarely discussed as an option, especially for girls. My parents worked in manufacturing, honest, hard-working people who always encouraged me to study hard but had limited means to support advanced education. We had one family computer that I became obsessed with from the age of 12. While other teenagers were hanging out at the mall, I was teaching myself how to code from library books and free online tutorials. College was a financial stretch, so I attended community college while working part-time at an electronics store. I learned as much from fixing customers' computers as I did from my classes. After earning my associate degree, I landed an entry-level job at a local IT company. The pay was minimal, but the experience was invaluable. I spent my evenings building my own projects and contributing to open source, slowly building a portfolio that spoke louder than my limited formal education. My first real break came when I developed a small security application that caught the attention of a regional tech blog. That bit of recognition opened doors, allowing me to move to a mid-sized software company in Chicago. For 3 years, I absorbed everything I could about enterprise security solutions, putting in extra hours and volunteering for the challenging projects others avoided. My reputation for solving complex security issues grew steadily. That reputation is what brought me to Nexus Technologies 3 years ago. Nexus was not yet the industry giant it is today, but it was growing rapidly with its innovative approach to integrated security solutions. Robert Wilson, the company founder, personally reached out after seeing a presentation I gave at a regional tech conference. The interview process was grueling, 6 rounds with different team members, but Robert and Benjamin Clark, the CTO at the time, seemed genuinely impressed by my practical knowledge and creative problem-solving approach. Benjamin became both my boss and mentor. A brilliant developer in his own right, he had a management style that brought out the best in his team. He recognized my potential immediately and gave me increasing responsibility. Under his guidance, I flourished, leading several successful projects and earning the respect of my colleagues. The work environment at Nexus was everything I had dreamed of: collaborative, challenging, and supportive. We worked hard but celebrated our successes together. Janet Peterson in quality assurance quickly became my closest friend at the company. Her attention to detail complemented my innovation-focused approach, and we often joked that between us we made one perfect developer. Allison Martinez in human resources was another ally, always advocating for the technical team and ensuring we had the resources we needed. About 18 months ago, Benjamin approached me with an opportunity that would change everything. Nexus was looking to develop a new generation security protocol that could adapt to emerging threats in real time. This was my chance to create something truly revolutionary. I threw myself into the project, often staying until midnight, working through complex algorithms and testing novel approaches. The basic concept was an artificial intelligence-driven system that could identify patterns in security breaches before they became full-scale attacks, essentially learning and evolving its defenses. As the project took shape, I became increasingly aware of its potential value. During a routine contract renewal, I consulted with a lawyer friend who suggested I negotiate an intellectual property clause. It was not that I distrusted Nexus, but she advised it was standard practice for developers working on potentially groundbreaking technology. Robert and Benjamin were surprisingly receptive to the idea. We agreed that while the company would have licensing rights, the intellectual property would revert to me if my employment was terminated without a 90-day notice period. At the time, it seemed like a minor detail in a company where everyone was treated fairly. 6 months into the project, we had a working prototype that was performing beyond expectations. The security protocol, which I had named Guardian, was identifying and neutralizing test attacks with remarkable accuracy. Benjamin was ecstatic, showcasing my work to the board and giving me full credit. Robert started bringing potential clients in for demonstrations, and there was talk of a significant bonus when the product launched. Then came the news that would set everything in motion. Benjamin called me into his office one Friday afternoon looking uncharacteristically somber. His wife had been offered a prestigious medical position in another state, and after much consideration, he had decided to relocate with her. He was leaving Nexus. The news hit me hard. Benjamin had been more than a boss. He had been a champion of my work and a trusted advisor. He assured me that Robert was already interviewing candidates to replace him and promised that my project would continue to be a priority. As a parting gesture, he documented my contributions to Guardian in detail and added a formal memo to my personnel file, acknowledging me as the principal architect. 2 weeks later, Robert introduced the team to Marcus Reynolds, our new CTO. With an impressive resume from larger tech companies and an assertive presentation style, Marcus seemed like a capable replacement. During our first one-on-one meeting, he expressed enthusiasm about Guardian and assured me the project would continue under my leadership. I allowed myself to hope that the transition would be smooth, that my hard work would continue to be recognized, and that Guardian would become the success we all anticipated. I had no idea how quickly everything would change, or that I would soon be fighting not just for recognition but for ownership of my creation. The first few weeks with Marcus as CTO were cordial but distant. He scheduled individual meetings with all team leads asking detailed questions about current projects and workflows. His management style was more formal than Benjamin's, but I initially attributed that to him being new and establishing professional boundaries. I made every effort to be helpful, providing comprehensive documentation on Guardian and explaining the innovative aspects that made it unique in the market. During our second meeting, I noticed the first red flag. While reviewing my technical specifications, Marcus interrupted repeatedly to suggest improvements that would actually compromise the system's adaptability. When I tried to explain the reasoning behind my approach, he cut me off with, "I have been implementing security protocols since you were in high school, Grace." The condescension in his tone was unmistakable, but I swallowed my pride and tried to maintain a collaborative attitude. In team meetings, more troubling patterns emerged. Marcus would ask for input but then dismiss my suggestions without consideration. Twice I proposed solutions to implementation challenges only to have him ignore them. Then minutes later he would rephrase my exact idea and present it as his own. Janet noticed too, shooting me sympathetic glances across the conference table when it happened. "He just needs time to recognize your expertise," Janet reassured me over lunch. "Benjamin spoke so highly of you. Marcus will come around." I wanted to believe her. I made deliberate efforts to build rapport, with Marcus stopping by his office to provide unsolicited progress updates and sending congratulatory emails when other projects under his supervision reached milestones. His responses were increasingly terse, often just noted or "keep me updated." Despite these interpersonal challenges, Guardian continued to evolve. My team of 3 junior developers was dedicated and talented, and together we refined the algorithms until they performed with 97% accuracy in simulated attacks. When Robert brought news that Telford Industries, a major player in corporate security, was interested in potentially licensing Guardian, I felt vindicated. This was the recognition my work deserved. The day before the Telford presentation, Marcus called me into his office. Expecting final preparation for the meeting, I brought my demonstration materials and talking points. "I will handle the presentation tomorrow," he said without preamble. "But I have prepared everything," I protested. "No one knows Guardian better than I do." "Exactly the problem," Marcus replied, leaning back in his chair. "You are too deep in the technical weeds. This is a business meeting, not a code review. I need to position this appropriately for executives who do not care about algorithm details." "I understand that, but surely I should be there to answer technical questions. We need to present a unified front. Too many voices complicate the message." His tone made it clear the decision was final. "Send me your presentation materials, and I will incorporate what is necessary." Disappointed, but still a team player, I sent him my meticulously prepared slides and demonstration script. That night I could barely sleep, worried about how Guardian would be presented without me there to ensure accuracy. The next day I waited anxiously for news of the Telford meeting. Around 3 in the afternoon, Janet texted me. "They are still in there. Looks good from what I could see passing by." At 5:30, Robert himself stopped by my desk, beaming. Telford is impressed. They want to move forward with licensing discussions. Marcus really sold them on the technology. That is great news, I said, genuinely pleased about Telford, but still disappointed at being excluded. Did they have technical questions I should prepare for in follow-up meetings? Robert looked slightly confused. Marcus handled everything beautifully. He really understands the system inside and out. That was when it hit me. Robert had no idea I had been excluded from the presentation. I opened my mouth to clarify, but was interrupted by Marcus approaching with several Telford executives in tow. "And here is our development team," he said smoothly, gesturing to my area. "Grace and her programmers handle the coding aspects under my architectural guidance." Under his architectural guidance, I stood stunned as Marcus continued. The breakthrough came when I restructured the core algorithms to incorporate adaptive learning modules. Grace has been very helpful implementing those specifications. The Telford executives nodded appreciatively, clearly impressed with Marcus. One of them directed a question to me. "So you helped code Mr. Reynolds' security concept?" Before I could respond, Marcus interjected, "Grace is one of our most diligent developers. The team has done excellent work bringing my vision to life." I felt physically ill as they moved on, continuing their tour. Marcus had not just presented Guardian, he had claimed credit for its fundamental concept. And now Robert and potential clients believed it was his creation. That evening, I confided in Janet over drinks at a nearby bar. He completely misrepresented my role. Guardian is my creation, my architecture, my algorithms. He described me as basically a coding monkey following his brilliant vision. "That is seriously messed up." Janet agreed, her expression darkening. "Have you talked to Robert about it?" "How can I, without seeming petty or unprofessional? It would be my word against his. And Marcus is the new executive hotshot." The next week brought more disturbing developments. Marcus began reassigning portions of Guardian to other developers, ostensibly to speed up implementation but effectively diluting my control over the project. In team meetings, he referred to architectural changes he wanted without consulting me first. When I raised concerns about how these changes might affect system integrity, he dismissed them as resistance to improvement. I began documenting everything meticulously, saving emails, recording meeting notes, and keeping a detailed log of my contributions versus Marcus's actual input. It felt paranoid, but something told me I might need this evidence later. After a particularly frustrating meeting where Marcus announced a reframing of Guardian's core functionality without any prior discussion, I finally requested a private conversation with him. "I need to discuss my role on Guardian." I began trying to keep my tone professional despite my growing frustration. As the original architect of the system, I should be consulted before fundamental changes are made. Marcus regarded me coldly. "Guardian is a company project, not your personal creation. As CTO, I determine the strategic direction of all our technologies. Of course, it is a company project, but I designed the original architecture and algorithms. My expertise should be respected." "Your expertise is valued, Grace. But so is your ability to be a team player. I am restructuring for efficiency, and I need everyone aligned with my vision." His emphasis on my vision made his perspective abundantly clear. I left that meeting with a sinking feeling. This was no longer about professional recognition, it was about watching my creation being systematically taken from me piece by piece. The project I had poured my heart and soul into was being corrupted, and there seemed to be nothing I could do about it. The systematic dismantling of my role on Guardian became more aggressive in the weeks that followed. Marcus implemented a new project management structure that required all code changes to go through him for approval, effectively giving him veto power over my design decisions. My access to certain parts of the codebase was restricted under the guise of security compartmentalization, making it increasingly difficult to maintain the architectural integrity of the system. During one code review, Marcus spent 20 minutes criticizing my variable naming conventions in front of the entire development team. "This is not how professional enterprise code is structured," he said dismissively. "We need to refactor this to match industry standards." The standards he referenced were outdated approaches I had deliberately avoided to make Guardian more adaptable. The micromanagement extended beyond technical aspects. Marcus began scheduling critical Guardian meetings at times he knew conflicted with my recurring therapy appointment, which had been on my calendar since before he joined the company. When I requested accommodations, he responded with, "We all make sacrifices for important projects. Perhaps you should reconsider your priorities. Janet witnessed one particularly humiliating exchange and caught up with me in the break room afterward. He is deliberately undermining you, she said, her voice low. This is not normal management, this is targeted. I know, I admitted, the weight of the situation crushing me. But what can I do? He is the CTO. Document everything, Janet advised, and maybe talk to Allison in HR. This is creating a hostile work environment. I nodded, but we both knew how difficult it would be to prove management bias against an executive with Marcus's authority. My suspicions about Marcus's ultimate intentions were confirmed when I overheard him discussing Guardian with the marketing team. I had stopped by their department to coordinate on documentation when I heard Marcus's voice from the conference room door slightly ajar. We will be rebranding it as Sentinel for the product launch, he was saying. A complete security solution architected by our executive team to meet enterprise needs. My heart sank. Not only was he taking credit for my work, but he was also erasing its very identity. Guardian had been my name chosen because the system served as a protective presence for network security. Sentinel was cold, corporate, forgettable. That evening I attempted to speak with Robert. As the founder who had personally recruited me, I hoped he might remember my contributions and intervene. I caught him as he was leaving for the day. Robert, do you have a minute to discuss Guardian? I have some concerns about the direction Marcus is taking it. Robert glanced at his watch. Can it wait? I am already late for dinner with investors. It is important. The architectural changes being implemented are compromising the core functionality that made it valuable in the first place. He sighed. Look, Grace. I brought Marcus in because he has experience scaling technologies for enterprise adoption. I am sure he knows what he is doing. Have you tried being more collaborative with him? His response made it clear that Marcus had been shaping Robert's perception behind the scenes. I have tried, but... Give it another shot, Robert said, already moving toward the elevator. I am sure you two can work it out. Marcus speaks very highly of the coding team's capabilities. The coding team. Not my innovation or leadership, but my ability to write code to someone else's specifications. I stood there watching the elevator doors close, feeling more alone than ever. The next day, Allison from HR asked to meet with me privately. My hopes rose briefly, thinking perhaps someone had noticed the situation and was stepping in. Instead, her expression was grave as she closed her office door. This is unofficial, Grace, she began, but I wanted to give you a heads up. Marcus has been documenting performance concerns about you in his monthly reports. Performance concerns. My technical deliverables have all been on time and functioning above specifications. The issues he is raising are about teamwork and adaptability. He has characterized you as resistant to direction and unwilling to embrace the company's evolving vision. Allison looked genuinely troubled. I pushed back, citing your excellent performance reviews under Benjamin, but he implied that Benjamin may have been too lenient with you. The realization that Marcus was actively building a case against me sent waves of anxiety through my body. That night, I barely slept, my mind racing through options and scenarios. The project I had created was being taken from me piece by piece, and now my very job seemed at risk. The stress began affecting my health. I developed persistent headaches and found myself losing weight as my appetite diminished. Coding once my joy and passion became a source of dread as I anticipated Marcus's criticism of every line I wrote. Janet noticed the change in me. You look exhausted, she commented one morning, placing a coffee on my desk. Are you sleeping at all? Not really, I admitted. I keep thinking about Guardian and how it is being ruined. 3 years of work, Janet. My best work. Have you considered looking for another position? There are companies that would value your talent properly. I had considered it, of course, but Guardian was more than just a job to me. It was my creation, my contribution to the field I loved. Walking away would mean abandoning it to someone who did not understand its potential or care about its integrity. Instead, I focused on protection and documentation. I meticulously backed up all my original designs, code repositories, and email exchanges with Benjamin that proved my architectural role. I created a detailed timeline of Guardian's development, highlighting my contributions and innovations. If nothing else, I would have evidence of what I had created. As Marcus continued consolidating control over Guardian, I noticed he was bringing in developers from his previous company to work on what he was now calling core components. These newcomers were given access to parts of the system I was increasingly restricted from seeing. One evening, Janet texted me, "You need to see this." She had forwarded an email accidentally sent to her that contained a partial marketing brief for Sentinel describing it as developed by CTO Marcus Reynolds, bringing his security expertise from his tenure at Secure Tech Industries. The explicit claim of authorship was a new level of betrayal. This was no longer about internal credit or project control, this was about publicly erasing my role entirely. I decided to consult with an outside perspective. Stephanie Turner was not just my friend from college, but also an attorney specializing in intellectual property law. I had initially consulted with her when negotiating my contract with Nexus. Over dinner at my apartment, I laid out the situation and showed her the documentation I had been gathering. "This is serious, Grace," she said, reviewing my materials. "They are systematically pushing you out of your own creation. But legally, is there anything I can do? The work was done as part of my employment." Stephanie looked up from my contract, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Actually, there might be. This clause about intellectual property reverting to you, if terminated without 90 days' notice, is unusually favorable to you. Benjamin must have really valued your work to agree to this. Do you think Marcus knows about it? Based on his behavior, I doubt he has read your specific employment terms. Most executives assume all IP belongs to the company, full stop." She tapped the contract thoughtfully. "This gives you leverage, but only if they actually terminate you without proper notice. Right now, they are just sidelining you." Her words were both reassuring and troubling. I had protection, but only in the worst-case scenario, and part of me could not believe it would actually come to that. Despite everything, I still wanted to believe that professionalism and truth would prevail. "Keep documenting everything," Stephanie advised, "and make sure you have copies of all your work secured outside the company systems just in case." That advice would prove more valuable than either of us could have anticipated. The culmination of Marcus's takeover strategy arrived with the final presentation to Telford Industries before contract signing. This was to be Guardian's now rebranded as Sentinel's formal debut to our most significant client. Despite my central role in its creation, I learned about the meeting only through Janet, who saw it on the shared calendar. "You are not even invited?" she asked incredulously when I mentioned it. "That is ridiculous. You built the entire core architecture." I had long passed the point of surprise at Marcus's tactics, but this exclusion still stung. Guardian was my professional masterpiece, and I was being barred from witnessing its introduction to the world. On the morning of the presentation, I made a last-minute appeal to Robert, catching him in the hallway. "I should be in the Telford meeting," I said directly. "As the original architect of the system, I can address technical questions that might arise." Robert looked uncomfortable. "Marcus has the presentation well in hand, Grace. He feels too many technical people might complicate the message for the executives. But it is my system," I insisted, trying to keep the desperation from my voice. "I designed it. I built the prototype I solved. The adaptive learning challenges that make it valuable." His expression shifted to confusion. "That is not my understanding of the development history. Marcus has briefed me extensively on how he conceptualized the security architecture and guided the team through implementation." The realization that Marcus had been systematically rewriting history with Robert was devastating. Before I could respond, Marcus himself rounded the corner with the Telford contingent in tow. Seeing me with Robert, a flash of annoyance crossed his face before he smoothly interjected. "Robert, our guests are ready for the main presentation. Grace, I believe your team has that debugging task to complete this morning." There was no debugging task. It was a transparent dismissal, but in front of clients and the company founder, I had no choice but to nod and step aside. Against my better judgment, I slipped into the back of the conference room once the presentation began. Marcus stood confidently at the front, laser pointer in hand, showcasing his innovative security solution. Slide after slide detailed architectural decisions I had made, challenges I had overcome, and solutions I had developed, all presented as products of his visionary leadership. The breakthrough came, Marcus explained to the attentive executives, when I recognized that traditional security protocols were too static. "My approach incorporates advanced machine learning algorithms that adapt to emerging threats in real time." My approach. My algorithms. my recognition of the limitations of static security measures. Every significant innovation was now being claimed by a man who had contributed nothing to their development. When one Telford executive asked about a specific technical challenge I had solved through weeks of late nights and innovative coding, Marcus smiled confidently. That was one of the key insights that came to me based on my previous work at SecureTech. By reframing the problem, the solution became evident. I must have made a sound because several heads turned in my direction. Marcus's eyes narrowed when he spotted me, but he continued smoothly. In fact, our development team, led by my architectural guidance, implemented that solution in record time. Unable to bear any more, I slipped out of the room, my hands shaking with a combination of anger and helplessness. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. The woman, looking back at me, appeared exhausted and defeated, shadows under her eyes from weeks of stress and sleepless nights. I returned to my desk, trying to focus on actual work despite the emotional turmoil. Around 2 p.m, I attempted to access one of Guardian's core modules to fix a minor issue, only to discover my permissions had been revoked. A quick check confirmed I had been removed from several critical repositories. The timing made the message clear my presence at the presentation had consequences. The next morning, my email notification chimed with a calendar invite. Meeting with M. Reynolds and A. Martinez, 3 p.m., HR conference room. The subject line was blank, but the inclusion of Allison from HR told me everything I needed to know. The hours until the meeting passed in a blur of anxiety and preparation. I backed up additional documentation, sent key files to my personal email, and made sure my development notes were in order. If this was heading where I suspected, I wanted to be ready. At precisely 3 p.m., I entered the HR conference room. Marcus sat on one side of the table, his expression unreadable. Allison was beside him, looking uncomfortable, a folder of documents before her. A third person I did not recognize, likely from legal, sat silently in the corner. Grace, thank you for joining us. Allison began, her professional tone not quite masking her discomfort. As you know, Nexus Technologies has been undergoing strategic reorganization to better position our products for enterprise adoption. Marcus cut in, clearly impatient with the formalities. We are restructuring the development department. Your position is being eliminated effective immediately. Though I had been expecting it, the bluntness of his statement still felt like a physical blow. On what grounds, I managed to ask, my voice steadier than I felt. This is not performance-related. Allison hurried to clarify. It is strictly organizational. The direction of our security solutions requires different expertise moving forward. Marcus nodded. Your coding skills are adequate, but the architectural vision for Sentinel requires enterprise-level experience that you simply do not possess. The casual dismissal of my abilities, coupled with the use of the rebranded name, ignited a spark of anger through my shock. Guardian was my design, my architecture from the ground up. Every core algorithm came from my work, not yours. Grace Allison interjected with a warning tone. This is not productive. Marcus merely smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. Sentinel is a Nexus Technologies product developed under my direction as CTO. Your contributions as a team member are appreciated, but let us maintain perspective on your role. The legal representative spoke up for the first time. We have prepared a severance package that includes 2 weeks of pay and continuation of benefits through the end of the month, contingent upon signing a standard non-disclosure agreement regarding company intellectual property. 2 weeks. Not even close to the 90 days specified in my contract. I glanced at the document being slid across the table toward me, but did not touch it. I will need to review this with my attorney, I said, surprised by the calm in my voice despite the chaos of emotions within. Marcus frowned. The terms are standard and generous given the circumstances. I suggest you sign today to ensure continuous benefit coverage. Nevertheless, I will be reviewing it with counsel before signing anything. The meeting concluded shortly thereafter. Allison explained the logistics of my departure, her professional demeanor tinged with what seemed like genuine regret. I would be escorted to my desk to collect personal belongings, then to the exit. My access to company systems had already been revoked. As I packed the few personal items from my desk, Marcus appeared, watching with barely concealed satisfaction. Janet hovered nearby, her expression a mix of shock and outrage at what was happening. "I will need your company laptop and badge," Marcus said, as I placed my coffee mug and framed certifications in a cardboard box. I handed them over, silently determined not to give him the satisfaction of seeing my distress. As the security guard waited politely to escort me out, Marcus could not resist a parting shot. "Do not worry about Sentinel Grace. It is in better hands now. All your ideas now belong to us, and we will put them to proper use in the market." The casual cruelty of his statement, the smug certainty that he had won, stayed with me as I was escorted through the lobby and out into the afternoon sunlight. 3 years of work, my greatest professional achievement, stolen with a restructuring meeting and a smirk. I made it to my car before the tears came, great heaving sobs that seemed to rise from the very center of my being. The betrayal, the injustice, the sheer helplessness of my position crashed over me in waves. Everything I had worked for, everything I had created, taken by someone who had contributed nothing but corporate maneuvering. That evening, alone in my apartment, I cycled through emotions like stations on a radio. Anger gave way to despair, which transformed into self-doubt. Had I overestimated my contributions? Was I being unprofessional in my attachment to Guardian? Should I have been more politically savvy in navigating the corporate landscape? Around 8 p.m., Janet called. "I cannot believe what happened," she said, her voice tight with anger. "Everyone is shocked. It is so clearly personal and vindictive." "Has he said anything about why I was let go?" I asked, clutching at the possibility that Marcus might have revealed his true motives to others. "Not specifically, but he has already reassigned Guardian Sentinel to his buddies from SecureTech. Greg and Tyler started accessing your repositories within an hour of you leaving." Her voice lowered. "Grace, they are going through your code like vultures, extracting everything they can use." The image of strangers dismantling my work, probably not even understanding the elegant solutions I had crafted, sent a fresh wave of grief through me. "There is nothing I can do, Janet. It was work done for the company." "It is still wrong," she insisted. "Marcus is taking credit for everything you built. In the team meeting after you left, he talked about his vision finally coming to fruition, now that development was being properly directed." After we hung up, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, exhaustion pulling at me, but sleep remaining elusive. This was rock bottom. My creation stolen my career at Nexus, destroyed my professional reputation, potentially damaged by whatever narrative Marcus chose to spread about my departure. In the darkness of my bedroom, I allowed myself to fully feel the depth of the loss and betrayal, tears silently tracking down my temples into my hair. Around 3 a.m, drifting in that space between wakefulness and sleep, a memory surfaced. Benjamin's voice from the day we had negotiated my contract renewal. "This clause protects your intellectual contribution if things ever go sideways. Not that they would under my watch, but it is good business to protect yourself." I sat up, suddenly fully awake. The contract clause. The intellectual property provision. In their rush to remove me, had Marcus and the legal team actually checked the specific terms of my employment agreement? For the first time since the termination meeting, I felt a glimmer of hope. Morning brought clarity and purpose. After a night of emotional turmoil, I woke with a single focus, reviewing my contract. I retrieved the document from my home filing system, hands slightly trembling as I turned to the intellectual property section. There it was in clear legal language. "All intellectual property developed by the employee shall be licensed to the company for business purposes, with ownership remaining with the company, unless employment is terminated without the 90-day notice period specified in Section 4.2", which case all rights to intellectual property, primarily developed by the employee, shall revert to the employee." I read the paragraph 3 times, making sure I understood the implications. Then I called Stephanie. "They terminated me yesterday with only 2 weeks' notice," I explained after outlining the situation. "The contract specifically requires 90 days. "And you were the primary developer of Guardian?" Stephanie asked, professional interest evident in her voice. "I was the sole architect and primary developer. Benjamin documented this extensively before he left. There are emails, project plans, and code repositories that prove it." "Send me everything," she said decisively. "Your contract, any documentation of your role, the termination, details everything." This is exactly the scenario your IP clause was designed for. Over the next 3 days, I immersed myself in building our case. I compiled a comprehensive timeline of Guardian's development, starting with the original concept sketches I had created before even presenting the idea to Benjamin. I gathered emails where Benjamin had explicitly acknowledged my architectural role and innovative contributions. I organized my development journals, which detailed each breakthrough and design decision. Stephanie reviewed everything with growing excitement. "This is remarkably well documented," she said during one of our strategy sessions. "Many developers do not keep such detailed records of their creative process." "I have always journaled my work," I explained. "It helps me track my thinking and solve problems when I hit roadblocks. In this case, it also builds an ironclad case for your authorship." She tapped my contract thoughtfully. "The language here is unusually specific and favorable to you. Did Benjamin help craft this?" "He suggested the basic protection, but the legal team drafted the actual language. I do not think anyone expected it would ever come into play." "Well, Marcus certainly did not expect it," Stephanie smiled grimly. "His rush to push you out may be the very thing that cost them control of the technology." A text from Janet provided another crucial piece of evidence. "Checking in on you. BTW found these in the email archive. Thought they might help." Attached were internal emails between Marcus and the marketing team discussing the Sentinel launch, with one explicitly stating, "As discussed with Marcus, all references should position him as the architect and visionary behind the technology, with development credited to the broader engineering team." The deliberate erasure of my role was now documented in their own communications. Stephanie brought in a technical expert to review the codebase I had backed up, comparing it with my design documents to verify that the implementation matched my architectural vision. His report confirmed what I already knew: Guardian was unquestionably my creation, with its most innovative elements directly traceable to my documented design decisions. "What exactly are we asking for?" I questioned Stephanie as we prepared our legal strategy. "I do not want to return to Nexus, not after how I was treated." "We are not seeking reinstatement," she confirmed. "We are asserting your ownership rights to the intellectual property under the terms of your contract. This means either they license it properly from you with appropriate compensation and attribution, or they cease using it entirely." The calculation of fair market value for Guardian was complex. Stephanie brought in a technology valuation specialist who analyzed similar security solutions and their licensing structures. Based on the Telford contract alone, Guardian represented millions in potential revenue for Nexus. My personal share as the rightful owner would be substantial. "We should also consider the reputational aspect," Stephanie advised. "Your professional standing has been damaged by their actions. Proper attribution is as important as financial compensation." With all elements in place, Stephanie drafted a formal legal notice. The document was masterfully constructed, laying out the facts dispassionately but comprehensively. It cited my contract clause, detailed my role as primary architect and developer with supporting evidence, and noted the improper termination without the required notice period. The conclusion was clear: under the terms of my employment agreement, all rights to Guardian had reverted to me upon my termination. The letter ended with 3 demands: immediate cessation of use of my intellectual property, full attribution of my role as creator and architect in all company communications, and appropriate compensation for any continued licensing of the property. Technology. Attached was an invoice for the estimated market value of Guardian, a figure substantial enough to make even a successful company like Nexus take notice. "Are you ready for this?" Stephanie asked before sending the letter. "Once we make these assertions, there is no turning back. They will likely respond aggressively at first." I took a deep breath, thinking of all the late nights I had poured into Guardian, the elegant solutions I had crafted, the pride I had felt seeing it work exactly as I had envisioned. I thought of Marcus's smug smile as he claimed credit for my creation, his casual cruelty as I was escorted from the building. "Send it," I said firmly. "They need to understand that actions have consequences." The letter was delivered by courier to Nexus Technologies the following morning, addressed to Robert Wilson, Marcus Reynolds, and the legal department. And then we waited. The initial 48 hours passed in tense silence. I jumped each time my phone rang, expecting a furious call from Marcus, or a conciliatory one from Robert. Instead, there was nothing, which Stephanie assured me was normal. They are consulting with their legal team, assessing their exposure. No one makes quick decisions when the stakes are this high. On the third day, Janet texted me. Something big is happening. Emergency executive meeting called this morning. Marcus looks like he swallowed a lemon. My heart raced at the confirmation that our letter had made an impact. Still, I cautioned myself against premature celebration. A company with Nexus's resources had many ways to fight back, and Marcus had already demonstrated his willingness to play dirty. That evening, the first response came. Not from Nexus's legal team as we had expected, but from Robert himself, his number appearing on my phone around 7 p.m. Grace, he began, his tone a mixture of concern and confusion. I have just been reviewing some concerning documents regarding Guardian's ownership. I think we need to discuss this directly without lawyers if possible. I appreciate the call, Robert, but I think at this point legal representation is appropriate given the circumstances of my termination. He sighed heavily. I had no idea about the specific terms of your contract. Marcus assured me all standard IP protections were in place for the company. And yet no one consulted the actual contract before terminating me without proper notice. I observed, keeping my tone neutral despite the vindication I felt. There appears to have been a significant oversight, Robert admitted. I would like to meet with you and Stephanie tomorrow to discuss a resolution that works for everyone. This is not how I want Nexus to conduct business. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. the following day at Stephanie's office, neutral territory that gave us a psychological advantage. As we prepared, Stephanie cautioned me against accepting any initial offer. They are going to try to minimize their exposure. Remember what this technology is truly worth, both financially and to your professional reputation. That night, a mix of anxiety and cautious hope kept me awake. After weeks of feeling powerless, I finally had leverage. But I also recognized that this confrontation would permanently alter my relationship with Nexus and potentially impact my future in the industry. Standing up for oneself often comes with consequences, even when completely justified. As dawn broke, I made a promise to myself, whatever the outcome, I would not allow anyone to diminish my worth or steal my contributions again. The young woman who had once been grateful just to have a seat at the table was gone. In her place stood someone who understood her value and was prepared to demand recognition for it. The turning point had arrived, and I was ready. Stephanie's office projected exactly the professional gravitas we needed for the meeting. The conference room featured a large mahogany table, comfortable leather chairs, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. We arrived 30 minutes early to prepare, reviewing our key points and setting out copies of the most damning evidence. Remember, Stephanie advised as we heard the receptionist greeting our visitors, let them make the first offer, and do not show emotion no matter what is said. Robert entered first, looking tired and significantly less confident than I remembered. The company's general counsel, Patricia Winters, followed him with a stern expression. My heart rate spiked when Marcus strode in, his face a mask of controlled anger. Thank you for meeting with us, Robert began after introductions and initial pleasantries. We have reviewed your letter and supporting documentation and would like to resolve this situation amicably. Patricia took over with the practiced smoothness of an experienced corporate attorney. While we have some disagreements with your characterization of events, we recognize there may have been procedural oversights regarding Ms. Thompson's termination notice period. Procedural oversights, Stephanie echoed with raised eyebrows. My client was terminated with 2 weeks' notice when her contract explicitly required 90 days. This is not a minor technicality, it's a material breach that triggered the intellectual property reversion clause. Marcus leaned forward, unable to contain himself. This is absurd. Guardian was developed under company resources on company time. One contractual technicality does not change that fundamental reality. I maintained my composure, though it took considerable effort. The technicality you are referring to was a specifically negotiated term that Robert and Benjamin both agreed to, recognizing my central role in creating Guardian. Robert looked uncomfortable. I recall the general discussion about protecting your contribution. Grace, though, I admit, I did not review the specific language after Benjamin's departure. Which is exactly the problem, Stephanie interjected smoothly. No one bothered to check Miss Thompson's actual contract terms before making decisions that had significant legal implications. Patricia attempted to redirect the conversation. Regardless of how we arrived at this point, Nexus is prepared to offer a resolution. She slid a document across the table. We are prepared to provide an additional 8 weeks of severance pay to address the notice period discrepancy, along with a consultant credit on any future Guardian-related marketing materials. Stephanie did not even glance at the document. That proposal fails to address the fundamental issue. Under the terms of her contract, my client now owns the intellectual property rights to Guardian. Your offer does not acknowledge that reality. Marcus scoffed. This is clearly a negotiating tactic. Miss Thompson was one developer among many who worked on various aspects of the system. That was when Stephanie unveiled our first piece of evidence, sliding a folder toward Robert and Patricia. These are emails from Benjamin Clark, your former CTO, explicitly identifying Miss Thompson as the principal architect and primary developer of Guardian. This one, she pointed to a highlighted section, specifically states that the adaptive learning algorithm that forms the core innovation of the system was entirely her creation. As Robert and Patricia reviewed the emails, I watched Marcus's expression darken. He had clearly not expected this level of documented evidence. Stephanie continued methodically presenting the technical expert's analysis, comparing my design documents with the implemented system, then the internal marketing emails, showing the deliberate effort to reposition Marcus as the Blake creator. With each new piece of evidence, the dynamic in the room shifted perceptibly. Robert's expression moved from diplomatic neutrality to growing concern. Patricia began taking extensive notes, the sign of an attorney recognizing a problematic case. Marcus alternated between barely suppressed anger and attempts at dismissive confidence that became less convincing by the minute. Even if we accept that Miss Thompson had a significant role in development, Patricia tried again. The market value estimation in your letter is wildly inflated. Guardian is an unproven technology, with no established revenue stream. Stephanie was prepared for this argument as well. We have documentation of the Telford Industries contract, which your own marketing materials valued at 7 figures annually. Additionally, we have identified 3 other client presentations where Guardian, rebranded as Sentinel, was positioned as a cornerstone offering. The valuation is, if anything, conservative. The meeting continued for nearly 3 hours, with proposals and counterproposals, gradually moving closer to acknowledging my ownership rights. Throughout, I maintained professional composure, speaking only when directly addressed, and focusing on factual details rather than emotional grievances, though the latter simmered just below the surface. The breakthrough came when Robert finally asked for a private word with Patricia and Marcus. When they returned after 20 minutes of hushed discussion in the hallway, the atmosphere had changed dramatically. We would like to propose a new framework for resolution. Patricia began her tone, notably more conciliatory. Nexus acknowledges Miss Thompson's primary role in developing the technology and agrees to license it from her as the recognized owner with appropriate financial compensation and full attribution in all marketing and technical documentation. It was the first acknowledgement of my ownership rights, a critical concession that validated our legal position. We would need to discuss specific terms, Stephanie replied, but that framework could form the basis for a resolution. Marcus remained silent during this exchange, his expression stormy. When Robert suggested forming a working group to hammer out the details, Marcus abruptly stood. This is rewarding contractual gamesmanship over company loyalty, he snapped. If we capitulate to these demands, we set a dangerous precedent. Robert's response was measured but firm. We are recognizing the reality of our legal position, Marcus, and attempting to resolve it in a way that allows the technology to move forward while appropriately acknowledging its creator. The emphasis on the last word was subtle but unmistakable. Marcus stormed out, leaving Robert to apologize for his behavior. I think it would be best if we continued these discussions without Marcus present. In fact, he added with a significant glance at Patricia, I will be personally reviewing his handling of this entire situation. Over the next week, negotiations proceeded with surprising speed. Without Marcus's obstruction, we quickly reached agreement on the core issues. I would retain ownership of Guardian with Nexus, licensing it under favorable but fair terms. My role as creator and architect would be explicitly acknowledged in all company materials, and I would receive substantial compensation for both the licensing rights and the damages resulting from the improper termination. Janet kept me updated on the internal fallout. Marcus has been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation, she reported. Robert has been meeting with the development team asking detailed questions about how Guardian was developed and who contributed what. The final agreement was signed 10 days after our initial meeting. Beyond the financial terms, which were generous enough to give me complete freedom in choosing my next career steps, the acknowledgement of my contribution was comprehensive. All marketing materials would identify me as the creator and principal architect of the technology, and any further development would require my consultation and approval. As I signed the last page of the agreement, Robert extended his hand. I owe you an apology, Grace. I should have been more involved, more aware of what was happening within my own company. This should never have reached this point. Thank you, I said, accepting his handshake. I would have preferred it had not come to this either. Would you consider returning to Nexus? He asked unexpectedly. Not reporting to Marcus, of course. In fact, that may no longer be an issue. I appreciated the offer but knew immediately it was not the right path forward. I think we have found a good resolution that allows both of us to move forward separately, but collaboratively on Guardian. That feels like the healthiest arrangement after everything that has happened. He nodded in understanding. Your contribution will be properly recognized from now on, I give you my word. 1 week later, Janet called with news I had been secretly hoping for but had not wanted to explicitly wish for. Marcus has been terminated, she reported. Robert announced it this morning. Apparently, the investigation found multiple instances of similar behavior with other developers, though none as extreme as your case. The vindication was sweet not for Marcus's downfall specifically, but for the recognition that what had happened to me was objectively wrong and that there were consequences for such actions. The system, which had seemed so stacked against me in my darkest moments, had ultimately worked. As I hung up the phone, I realized something profound had shifted within me. The anger and betrayal that had consumed me for weeks had transformed into something more constructive, a determination to use this experience to protect others, and to never again undervalue my own worth or contributions. The victory was complete, but its true value lay not in the financial settlement or even in reclaiming ownership of Guardian. The real win was in standing up for myself when it would have been easier to walk away, in having the courage to fight for recognition when erasure seemed inevitable, and in proving that sometimes justice does prevail in the face of power imbalance. Guardian was mine again in name and in fact, but more importantly, I had reclaimed my own sense of agency and worth. 6 months after the settlement with Nexus Technologies, I stood in the reception area of my new office space, watching as the sign installer finished mounting the frosted glass logo Guardian Security Solutions. The journey from wrongfully terminated employee to founder of my own security consultancy had been intense but extraordinarily fulfilling. The financial settlement had provided the capital to launch the business, while the retained ownership of my security protocol gave me a proprietary technology as my flagship offering. Within weeks of opening, I had secured 3 clients drawn by the innovative approach to adaptive security that Guardian offered, and somewhat ironically by the publicity surrounding my legal battle with Nexus. The licensing agreement we had negotiated allowed Nexus to continue using Guardian, now properly attributed with their existing clients. This arrangement had evolved into a surprisingly collaborative relationship. Robert had made good on his promise to honor my contribution, even going so far as to issue a public statement acknowledging me as the creator and architect of the technology. My new office suite was modest but comfortable, designed to foster the collaborative environment I had once valued at Nexus before Marcus's arrival. Natural light flooded the open workspace where 4 developers now worked on expanding Guardian's capabilities. In the corner, Janet's desk was positioned with the best view of the city skyline, a small acknowledgement of her loyalty during the darkest period of my professional life. Janet had joined me 3 months after the settlement, tired of the political environment that persisted at Nexus despite Marcus's departure. I want to work somewhere that values actual innovation, not just corporate maneuvering, she had explained. Her quality assurance expertise had proven invaluable as we scaled Guardian for new applications. The experience had transformed my approach to business in fundamental ways. Every employee contract now included clear language about intellectual contribution and proper attribution. I maintained meticulous documentation of development processes and design decisions. Most importantly, I fostered a culture of recognition, ensuring that every team member's contributions were acknowledged and valued. My relationship with Robert had evolved into something unexpected. After the initial settlement, he had reached out to discuss potential collaboration opportunities. Initially skeptical, I had agreed to meet for coffee, where he had surprised me with a genuine apology and a desire to learn from the experience. I built Nexus to be innovative and supportive of talent, he had explained. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that mission. Your situation was a painful but necessary wake-up call. We now met monthly to discuss the ongoing licensing arrangement and potential collaborative projects. The relationship was professional, respectful, and mutually beneficial, a remarkable transformation from the adversarial positions we had occupied 6 months earlier. The most significant change, however, was within myself. The confidence I now carried into client meetings and industry events stemmed not just from professional success, but from having stood up for my worth when it would have been easier to walk away. I had discovered a resilience I had not known I possessed. This newfound confidence extended to how I positioned myself in the industry. I now regularly spoke at technology conferences about both security innovation and intellectual property protection for developers. Many young professionals, particularly women in tech, sought me out for advice on negotiating contracts and ensuring proper recognition for their work. One afternoon, I met with a young developer who reminded me powerfully of myself 3 years earlier. Talented and passionate about her work, but unsure how to navigate corporate politics and protect her innovations, she had reached out after hearing me speak at a conference. I am worried about being too assertive about credit, she admitted during our conversation. I do not want to seem difficult or ungrateful for the opportunity. I recognized the concern, immediately having once felt the same hesitation. Claiming appropriate credit for your work is not being difficult, it is being accurate, I told her. Your contributions have value, and acknowledging that value is not just your right, but your responsibility to yourself and to others who will follow your path. By the end of our meeting, we had reviewed her current project documentation and drafted language for a follow-up email to her manager that clearly outlined her contributions while maintaining a collaborative, team-oriented tone. The balance between self-advocacy and professionalism was delicate but essential. As my business grew, I implemented a mentorship program specifically designed for underrepresented groups in technology. The experiences with Marcus had highlighted how easily contributions could be erased when power dynamics were imbalanced. By providing guidance on both technical skills and professional navigation, I hope to create a more equitable path for others. Guardian Security Solutions reached a significant milestone when we secured our first government contract, a project that would implement our adaptive security protocol across multiple agencies. The day the contract was finalized, I brought champagne to the office for a team celebration. To Guardian, I toasted, looking around at the talented professionals who had joined my vision. But more importantly, to each of you who make it what it is. Your contributions are seen, valued, and will always be recognized. The contrast with Marcus's approach could not have been more stark. Where he had sought to diminish others to elevate himself, I found that acknowledging the strengths and contributions of my team created a collective excellence that benefited everyone, including me. The security protocol itself continued to evolve in ways I had always envisioned but had been prevented from implementing under Marcus's restrictive oversight. With full creative control and a team that shared my vision, Guardian became even more responsive and adaptive than the original version, earning industry recognition and multiple technology awards. Perhaps the most profound lesson from the entire experience was learning the difference between forgiveness and forgetfulness. I had not forgotten the betrayal and injustice of what Marcus had done, but I had released the anger that once consumed me. That energy was now directed toward building something positive rather than dwelling on past wrongs. This perspective helped when inevitably I encountered Marcus at an industry conference about a year after the settlement. He had landed at a smaller competitor, though in a less prestigious role than he had held at Nexus. Our eyes met across the exhibition hall, and for a moment tension crackled in the air between us. Then I simply nodded in acknowledgement and continued my conversation with a potential client. His power over my emotional state was gone, replaced by the quiet confidence of someone who had faced adversity and emerged stronger. Whatever path his career took from there was his own journey, no longer intertwined with mine. As Guardian Security Solutions celebrated its first anniversary, I reflected on the unlikely path that had led to its creation. What had begun as the worst professional betrayal of my career had ultimately become the catalyst for my greatest success. Without Marcus's attempts to claim my work, I might never have discovered the courage to launch my own venture or the voice to advocate for proper recognition in the industry. The lesson was powerful and paradoxical. Sometimes our greatest setbacks contain the seeds of our most significant growth. The key is having the resilience to withstand the initial pain and the wisdom to extract the valuable lessons hidden within it. Standing in my office, looking out at the team I had assembled and the business I had built, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey, challenging as it had been. Guardian was more than a security protocol or a company name. It had become a philosophy, a reminder to protect what matters, to stand guard over your contributions and your worth. If you have ever had your work or ideas taken without proper credit, I hope my story inspires you to stand up for yourself. Have you experienced something similar in your professional life? Share your story in the comments below. Remember that your contributions have value and deserve recognition. If you found this account helpful, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear this message today. Thank you for listening, and remember, protect your work, know your worth, and never let anyone diminish your achievements.